Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. My name is Maria Bueno. I work for the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, and I'll be chairing this webinar today. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you all here. This webinar is promoted by the UN Big Data Regional Hub in Brazil, and we have the support of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, CEPAL, and also the support of the Knowledge Transmission Network of the Statistical Conference of the Americas, and also we have the support of the World Bank. Today, we'll talk about the use of mobile phone data for public policies. And our first speaker is Ms. Esperanza Macpantai. She is a senior statistician of the ICT Data and Analytics Division of the International Telecommunication Union, where she has been working since December 2000. She is responsible for the collection, harmonization, and dissemination of ICT statistics. She is the ITU's representative to the Partnership of Measuring ICT for Development and the Steering Committee, the UN Interagency Expert Group on SDG Indicators, and also the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics, where she currently leads the task team on mobile phone big data. Now, Esperanza, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you so much, Maria, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So let me just double check if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see, but yes, perfect.
Okay, so thank you so much for being here today. Let me share with you some of the work that we have been doing in the task team on mobile phone big data and the collaboration that we are going to discuss today with the World Bank. So if you're not familiar with the work that we do in the ITU, so we are the UN Specialized Agency on Telecommunication and ICT, and as our mandate, we collect and disseminate official statistics that relates to the ICT sector. So the type of data that we collect also includes those that are listed in the SDG monitoring framework and collected from both household surveys and administrative sources. So in particular, the two that I highlighted here are those indicators that are in the SDGs, and in the past several years, we are exploring the use of mobile phone big data to complement or supplement missing information for these two indicators. So we started our big data work way back in 2016, where we piloted a number of countries, mainly to gain experience on how to use mobile phone big data and how we can help countries use this new data source. In 2020 and 2021, we worked specifically with Brazil and Indonesia to test these two SDG indicators that I mentioned. And so far, the work that we've done in these two countries proved to be very successful, and they are particularly robust enough to complement the data that are calculated from household surveys. So until now, we are exploring other use cases and possibilities with several countries. And these discussions involves, of course, how data could be accessed, how we can help countries with the methods that we develop in the task team on MPD. So specifically for this afternoon, I think it will be good to understand how an MPD project or work in the national context can be implemented. And of course, there are requirements to be able to succeed in this work. One of this is to have a stakeholder cooperation. And here I would like to underline that there are many stakeholders that should be involved in this work, and they should be working together to ensure that the necessary collaboration or the necessary information is discussed around the table. So the first one, of course, is the ministry who is responsible for the use case that you are looking at. So for example, in our case, it's the Ministry of ICT or the Ministry of Telecom, but there can be use cases, for example, on tourism and migration where the responsible ministry needs to be involved. So they are basically the policymakers that will be using the data that are coming from mobile phone data. The telecom regulator is an important agency because they are working directly with the mobile network operators. The mobile network operators, on the other hand, is very important because they are the custodian agencies of this new data source. The National Statistics Office, and I think many of you are coming from the National Statistics Office, is very important because you have the methods, the statistical methods that are necessary to analyze this new data source. And of course, everything that we do in traditional data sources, we can also apply with the mobile network data. The Data Protection Agency is responsible for approving the release of the data of the MNOs. And so they are also very important to be involved from the beginning. Another requirement for an MPD implementation are the guides or the methods that are related to the use case. And this is important because we would like to have this data comparable across countries. So we need to look for these methods that are applied in other countries and learn from their experiences as well. Countries also need skills, so the capacity to analyze this new data source. Many of our statistical processes can be used in this new data source, but we need to have the new skills such as the use of big data tools that are necessary to analyze mobile phone data. There's also the requirement of data access. So data access is a big component of an MPD implementation. There has to be a discussion with the mobile network operators and data protection agency how the data could be accessed from mobile network operators. There are currently 3 processing models and 3 data access methods. One is where the operator processes the data in the local premises and they transfer the processed data to the agency who will be using those data. There's an agency-led, meaning it can be the regulator or the ministry who is sponsoring the project on MPD, who will be the one processing the data. So what happens here is that the mobile network operators transfers the raw data to the agency, and they will be the one who will be analyzing this. I think for the case of Brazil, this is the case where the operator transferred the data to the National Statistics Office. There's also a private-public partnership where a third party is commissioned or hired to analyze the data. And so they are the ones who either connect to the mobile operators' databases or go to the operator's premises to analyze this data. Another important requirement is the big data infrastructure because this data requires a huge capacity to store and analyze or process the data. And of course, another important requirement is international support. It can be financial support, it can be support in terms of the methods, it can be support related to discussions related to data access, or it can be a convening power with regards to putting together different stakeholders. And this international support, my colleagues Trevor and Sveta will be discussing later on. So just to share with you, the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science has one of its task team on mobile phone big data. As I mentioned, we had been working in this task team for several years now. And this task team is currently composed of more than 50 experts coming from international and regional organizations, nonprofit organizations, as well as countries, NSOs who had experience working on MPD. So what we do here is we discuss and we collaborate in making sure that the methods that can be applied in different countries are comparable, and at the same time, we can learn from the experiences of everyone. And so in this task team, we look at 6 different areas of statistics. We have disaster management, where displacement and disaster preparedness indicators are calculated out of mobile phone big data. We have dynamic population mapping for population statistics. We have migration for migration statistics. Tourism, those that are related to inbound and domestic tourism. Transportation statistics, and information society, where I'm coming from. So these 6 areas of statistics have developed guides or methodology manuals that countries can use when calculating mobile phone big data. And all of these use cases or areas of statistics include use cases that you can see and consult to learn from and see how they implemented it in the national context. You'll find those guides in the link that is provided in the screen below. And so one of these guides is on information society statistics, and this guide covers many elements, including like a background of why we need to do this work, how data could be accessed, what are the reference data that one can use to complement analysis of mobile phone big data, and how data could be processed, and any quality assurance frameworks that could be, or checks that could be employed to ensure the quality of the raw data and the calculated data coming from mobile phone big data. So there are many elements that needs to be considered, and I mentioned already those requirements that a country has to check before starting a mobile phone project. But we have to think of a mobile phone implementation as any statistical business process. So this is similar to, for example, when you are starting a new data collection on household statistics, that you will have to also consult with relevant stakeholders and see the relevant guides and materials that could be involved. It's important to assess the current situation in the country, the privacy laws, the telecommunication legislations, or statistical laws that will enable you to access the data and analyze mobile phone big data. It's important that the coordination is in place with all the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, because there can be some issues relating to the publication and use of this mobile phone data. And these agreements and discussions needs to be put in place in the beginning of every implementation or every project. It's important that a realistic timeline is set because this can be time-consuming, especially the one on data access. And in many cases, it's advisable that we start small. So in many countries, they tried, for example, an area of statistics, get a subset of data and see and practice and learn from it. And then an implementation, a full implementation is carried on as soon as the methods are tested. And of course, the mobile phone testing team remains available for any questions and knowledge that you are seeking. And at the same time, we welcome participation from countries who have experience or who would like to know how mobile phone big data can be used. And then finally, it's important that you have international support, and I will point that as the last point of my presentation, where this ITU World Bank project on mobile phone big data to work for policy will be elaborated later on by my colleague. And there are some resources that you can look at, those pilot projects. We have them available on the website. The task team has a lot of information on events and materials that I mentioned earlier, as well as an online training material that if you are not familiar yet with this new data source, you'll be able to see the many applications of mobile phone big data. And of course, you can contact me for any additional information that you will need. Thank you so much, Maria, and back to you.
Thank you, Esperanza. I forgot to say, but you can put your questions on the chat, and at the end of all the presentations, the presenters can answer. And now we have 2 presenters from the World Bank, Mr. Trevor Moreau and Ms. Sveta Milosheva. Trevor is a senior program lead with the Chief Statistician's Office in the Development Data Group at the World Bank. Trevor leads programs that put data and artificial intelligence to work for development. He currently manages a program under the Global Data Facility to build capacity to use mobile phone data for policy and official statistics. Sveta is a senior economist in the Development Impact Department at the World Bank. She co-leads the World Bank program on mobile phone data for policy under the Global Data Facility. She also leads the IA Connect program of impact evaluations focused on transport investments, and within this program leads the work on urban mobility. Her research focuses on the application of new big data sources, such as mobile phone data and crowdsourced data, to study questions in development and to evaluate the impact of development interventions. Please, Trevor and Sveta, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. I will go ahead and share my presentation.
It's coming. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Great. And hopefully the translation is working well in real time. So I'm excited to start us off as we talk about the Global Data Facility Mobile Phone Data for Policy program and the window and support program that is starting now. But before jumping into the program, we wanted to give a bit of motivation in terms of why invest in mobile phone data? Why should we spend our time, our resources in working with this new data source? And the key is that mobile phone data can be an extremely powerful tool for better policy making. If we know where people are located, how they are moving in real time, that could help decision makers in terms of making much more effective decisions so they understand what needs to happen right now based on what is happening in their own country. And so to give a few examples of all of the different sectors and areas where this could work, one is in the health space. Many of us saw during COVID-19 the use of mobile phone data to understand how COVID-19 was spreading within countries and across countries. But this type of work can be applied for any disease. So I actually started my own work using mobile phone data around a decade ago, looking at the spread of malaria in Senegal. And I was able to combine data on malaria cases in the country with data from a mobile phone provider to understand how the disease could spread from areas where there's very high prevalence of malaria to areas where they were very close to elimination. But as people travel, they bring the disease back. And this allowed me to look at how we could target testing and target policies more effectively so that we could reduce the disease burden. In the transport space, tourism space, of course, having this type of data on mobility is really critical. Understanding what are the mobility needs in a city, how are people traveling, where are potentially areas that are not accessed right now is really key for policy planning and to understand where we should be putting our next bus investment, our next metro investment. And so having this type of information can be extremely useful as we're thinking about how to use our resources more effectively. In the disaster space, it's also key to have real-time information. When there's an earthquake, when there's a flood, we need to know where people are right now. Using census data from 10 years ago is not going to help us in understanding where is the current situation, where are people, and where do we need to send resources? Where do we need to send support after something has happened? This is where having mobile phone data can be extremely powerful for policymakers so that they're able to react immediately and as a crisis situation is occurring so that as many people as possible can be helped and saved in that moment. Going beyond mobility, though, this type of data can also be useful in other ways. The way that people use their phones, how many text messages they're sending, how many calls they're making, or how many top-ups in their phone is potentially correlated with their socioeconomic status. And so then this could be used to try to measure socioeconomic status or poverty in a country. And this can allow us to have much better mapping of poverty compared to what we may be able to get from survey data, and to get that more frequently as well. So that rather than having a map every 5 years at a very high administrative level, mobile phone data can help us predict poverty at a much more granular level and to update that every year. And this can be especially useful, again, in terms of thinking about policy where we need to target resources. If, again, we need to get cash transfers out to people in case of an emergency or through the COVID-19 crisis, we need to know who we need to target, where we need to be targeting those resources. And so we can use mobile phone data to help us in that, especially in those situations where we don't have time to conduct a large-scale survey, where we need to be able to act right away. This type of data can be extremely powerful to help us make sure that we're working as quickly as possible and using the best information that we have. Of course, there's many challenges related to access, privacy, quality, representativeness. That's where also the program that we're developing is aiming to help with a lot of these different challenges. But there's an incredible opportunity. Investing in this type of data in low and middle income countries can help us transform the amount of data that's available. And when we combine this with rigorous methods, we can really support better evidence and policy insights so that we can turn our investments to be more effective, and we can increase those returns to all of our sectors, from transport to health to social protection and other key sectors. And the national statistics agencies are really key to help make this happen in terms of investing in the data and transforming the data into a tool that is useful for all of the different ministries and agencies in your countries. So we're really looking forward to supporting in this, and I'll turn over to my colleague Trevor, who will talk more about operationalizing this and how we make this happen. So Trevor, over to you, and I'll let you share your screen so that way you're able to move through the slides.
Great. Thank you, Sveta, and thank you to our hosts for graciously allowing us to share this opportunity that we have for countries to put mobile phone data to work for policy. So hopefully you can see my screen. This is a multi-partner window that provides essential resources, so funding resources to World Bank task teams and their country clients, as well as a support program that provides structured support in a country cohort program to deliver programmatic activities that we believe are essential to stand up durable pipelines to access mobile phone data, particularly basic mobile phone data that comes from mobile network operators. So Spain is our major partner. We also have several others, the ITU on the implementation side, and other parts of the World Bank that typically work with the regulators and the national statistical offices, which are key stakeholders to make these pipelines work for policy and official statistics. So we're at a special moment in the evolution of mobile phone data for policy. Researchers like Sveta and others have been experimenting with these methods for decades. However, it's been difficult to sustain consistent access to this data beyond a research project or beyond a pilot. During the pandemic, there was a lot of interest from governments to use this data to understand policy decisions surrounding the pandemic. We at the World Bank, and Sveta and I, as part of a task team, spoke with local ecosystems in 20, or actually closer to 40 countries during that period. And emerging from the pandemic, we see several initiatives that are looking to put standards in the use and the methods and the culture around accessing this data for policy and official statistics. And that's where we want to go in the next decade or so, or by 2030, having a critical mass of countries that have that are sustainably and responsibly using this data for policy and official statistics. Several surveys, recent surveys, one that you see here that the World Bank is involved with, indicate that basic mobile phone data is a priority for countries. So this particular survey, over 100 respondents, close to 80% of them consider mobile phone data a priority in the next 3 to 5 years. So our task is really to stand up a window and support program that will deliver the type of support that countries need, that are proportional to their maturity level in using mobile phone data for policy. As Sveta mentioned, there are lots of challenges, but there are also a lot of emerging good practices in the way the tools, in the software and the methods. What this program will really invest in is local capacity, the skills that are needed, the infrastructure that's needed, and provide grant making that can also help catalyze the possibility of using lending in this space to bring mobile phone data as part of an integrated national data system or local data system. So we are collaborating with several initiatives. A lot of the people that are working on our project are also involved with the Eurostat initiative. And this is an initiative that's promoting kind of a standard common architecture to process mobile network operator data in a way that is standardized at each processing block, and it involves the National Statistical Office. It also is capable of accommodating multiple mobile network operators. So this is not necessarily the model that all countries will adopt, but it is one that is really going a long way to put good practices in norms and standards in this space, and it can be adapted for various country contexts. The other initiative that Esperanza spoke is leading at the UN Mobile Phone Task Team at the UN Center of Expert Groups on Big Data. The program that we will support will draw heavily from the methodological guides. You see about 6 of those here, plus the handbook. So these are relatively mature methodologies for applications in these sectors. Of course, mobile phone data can be used in a wide range of other policy and statistical applications, but these are ones where the documentation is relatively more mature, and that we will be including in some of our core training, technical training programs. One more thing to mention, we've all worked together over the last half a year or so to come up with a collective theory of change that draws on the decades of collective experience that our partners have, our partners with the UN Mobile Phone Task Team, in their experience in how countries adopt and use mobile phone data, kind of the what essentials are needed for inputs, and then how those inputs lead to outcomes and impact in the system. So that's important for us to understand so that we can tailor or customize our support to these various this kind of progression from inputs to impact. And we've used this theory of change, which we will make public very shortly. It's going under review, but we've used it to design our own programming to help coordinate with partners and to help think about how we select the proposals and deliver the type of support that our teams and country clients need. But this can be used by any initiative that's working to build capabilities in mobile phone data for policy. So to give you an idea of what we're doing, what we have is kind of a cohort process. A cohort would be several countries that are going through a learning program more or less at the same time. So we would have an intake, a country intake workshop where 5 or so countries that are going through the program would identify where they're at as far as their maturity. So get kind of a self-assessment or conduct activities to understand whether they are at the foundational level, whether they're practitioners or experts, or maybe they're pre-foundation. They do not have any experience with mobile phone data, and they're just getting these conversations started. So that's a very important starting point, is to understand what the capacities are in terms of human resources, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of feasibility of the country or the initiative level. From there, we would, with the World Bank task teams and the local stakeholders, which could be the National Statistical Office, the regulator, possibly other nonprofits or academic partners in that local data ecosystem, they come up with their roadmap, their concept note on what it is that country in particular will do in mobile phone data. So that helps to formalize the partnerships. And once there's evidence of buy-in through the concept note and agreements, then we have budget to provision data infrastructure to process the mobile phone data. You remember that slide a few slides ago from the Eurostat model. So something like that type of a processing pipeline that would be in place with the mobile network operator. This does require some software, but a lot of countries already have this software installed. So if it's needed, we're prepared to provide that technical assistance to get it provisioned and kind of customized so it's able to do statistics and policy insights. We have a technical training program, so drawing upon what we're doing with the UN Mobile Phone Task Team, we'll have training for project managers or practitioners. We'll also have more technical training so that the technical, either the analysts or the engineers in that local data ecosystem can understand what they need to do to sustain these data pipelines and to build applications from the data products that are useful for policy. We have support for a couple, basic use case like dynamic population maps. So dynamic population maps can be used throughout the policy value chain on all types, a host of different decisions. But the applications, the country could decide they're maybe focusing on tourism to begin with or transport. So we have scope to provide support for a couple policy use cases, a basic one and a more advanced one. And as they advance on this journey to kind of being a practitioner or an expert in the use of mobile phone data, that would basically mean they are using this with multiple operators. They have data coming in, one or more operators. They're using it for one or more policy use case or statistical applications. So that's basically the program. There will be activities where the countries do together, like the intake workshops and maybe some of the technical trainings that are the foundational stuff. And there will be activities that are done with the World Bank specific to that country to get the infrastructure up to work on their use cases. We will also have budget if the country is interested to facilitate lending projects. The World Bank is doing a lot more lending in public data infrastructure in areas like integrated national data systems. And some countries may seek to integrate mobile phone data into a national data system, and there is lending support for that. But just to be clear, our program is a grant program, but we are working with partners in the World Bank that also work on lending in data systems. So I mentioned this a few times. We do have a kind of a light assessment that uses these categories of maturity from pre-foundation. These are countries where the conversation is just getting started, or maybe it has yet to start, but we're helping to bring the stakeholders together. We're helping to provide workshops and use cases so that they understand the opportunities and the risks involved, and some of the enablers and safeguards that need to be in place or they need to start thinking about to put this data to work for statistics. So that type of funding is available. The foundation, and I think of these as adjectives that describe the activities when I'm talking about pre-foundation and foundation or practitioner expert. The foundation level, these are the type of countries that are starting to set up the infrastructure to process the data, that are doing the technical training that's needed to sustain the pipelines, that are doing the technical training for the policy use cases like dynamic population or the other policy areas. We also have funding for research, particularly operational research, which really gets at understanding what is the value, what is the cost benefit of using mobile phone data to enhance an existing policy process or service delivery, or to understand some of how the data can be better interoperable with other data sources. So we do have some budget for the research side, but we're very much focused on standing up the everyday use of this data. And then we have practitioner/expert. So this is really once the countries have the infrastructure up, they have the pipelines running, and they're using the data for at least one policy use case, then we have budget to do additional policy use cases or to bring on additional mobile network operators. Maybe they're only had a pipeline with one operator. Now they want to get a multiple data pipeline going, or to do further research or to prepare lending projects. So these are the different types of countries that we envision in the cohort. We may have 1 or 2 pre-foundations, we may have 3 foundation, and maybe 1 or 0 experts in a country cohort. We will do several rounds of these cohorts. So the implementation period for a cohort is about 2 years. And we expect to launch a new cohort each year. So we'll have multiple cohorts. Right now, we have a window open for World Bank task teams. So that window is open. They can submit proposals. It will continue to be open through July 22nd. So about another month from now, this window is open. And I encourage you, if this looks interesting, to connect with your World Bank representatives if you know them, to encourage them to submit proposals, as well as you can reach out to us. I'll give you the information at the end of this slide if you'd like us to facilitate the matchmaking on that. But basically, we're looking at country considerations, like, the maturity of the local context in terms of the regulatory environment, in terms of the data infrastructure. Stakeholder engagement is a big one. We're also looking at programmatic considerations like the World Bank task team. How does it align with the country strategy and statistics, or some of the country development plans, things of that nature? And we get our proposals, and then we create our cohorts. So we'll have approximately 5 or so countries of mixed maturity level in the first cohort, which will launch. I'll show you the timeline here soon. Let's skip this slide, but just basically touch on it, I guess. There's data philanthropy or research. There's subsidized, so using grants to help create the market for government use of data. There could be programmatic returns from this, so affecting a policy use case, improving transport, etc. We're also interested in promoting commercial use of the data for the MNO. So we're trying to get the incentives right as we implement these. As I mentioned, the window is open. It was open since June 6th for proposals that we're accepting. It will continue to be open through July 22nd. We expect to identify that first cohort by the end of July, early August. And then we will have our initial cohort country intake workshop. This is where we're bringing stakeholders to this workshop in DC, October 7th through 9th. And they will go through activities to help formalize their plans and their roadmap to put mobile phone data to work for policy. This workshop, this country intake workshop, will coincide with a conference, a research conference on mobility data that we will also be hosting, so that we'll try to get synergies from the conference to the country intake workshop. There will be a lot of academics that do research in mobile phone data, a lot of the private sector telcos will be there, and others who deliver professional services and analytics in that space will be at both the NetMob and our workshops. We plan to announce at the UN World Data Forum the launch of our window. I think we're kind of going through a soft launch right now. We'll formally launch that to the world, announce that at the World Data Forum, which will take place in Colombia, I think November 11th through 15th. And by that time, our task teams, our projects should be up and running. They will have their budgets, and they will be conducting the training, the technical assistance that is needed. But just to recap, this global data facility, mobile phone data window and support program. So the Global Data Facility is an umbrella fund that supports the just data impact in general. And it supports several windows. Our window on mobile phone data is focused particularly on mobile phone data. We're delivering essential resources and programmatic activities to put this data to work in countries. Our approach is to support country cohorts, so several countries going through the process at the same time so that they can learn from each other and share their experience. We're looking to promote standards in these pipelines and in these methods and these policy applications. So working very closely with the content and standards that are being produced by others like Eurostat and the UN groups. We do use grants to facilitate lending. The World Bank is doing a lot more lending in data systems, which is important. Getting more and more important these days, and not just the systems themselves, but the broader systems, the governance, and the legal safeguards and other regulatory mechanisms to make sure this data is used responsibly and used in a way that delivers more targeted and cost-effective solutions. So that is the program. The slides will be shared if you'd like to learn more. There are a few courses out there. And I would recommend checking these out. We'll have more resources that are publicly available very soon, like the maturity framework for mobile phone data, like the theory of change, and other training resources that we're developing for practitioners and technical audiences. Okay, with that, again, like to thank our hosts for letting us present. You can contact us at the global GDF MPD at worldbank.org if you'd like more information, or if you'd like to help connect us with your World Bank representatives that can submit the proposals for your teams. Thank you, and back to Maria.
Thank you, Trevor. And also, I would like to thank to Sveta. And please put your questions on the chat, and please direct it to a speaker, okay? And I will start the questions. I heard some weeks ago a very interesting appointment. A technical from a National Statistics Office told that it took more than 1 year from her to convince her boss to invest in mobile phone data. What do you think about it? It's hard to convince the chiefs of national institutes of to use mobile phone data. It's because it's a new source of data. It's because it's a big data. What's the reasons for that? For you three, okay. Esperanza, you can start.
Yeah, maybe I can start. I think that's a challenge if the head of the NSO needs to be convinced, because normally in the UN Statistical Commission, in the international community, the heads of national statistical offices attend and are aware of UN Statistical Commission's proceedings and discussions, and the use of big data, including mobile phone big data, is really high on the agenda. So if that is the case, I think there's something wrong. Either the head of the NSO is not present on those meetings and probably not part of the discussions, but I think some work can be done there, and probably this is where the project can help raise awareness. There's different levels of developments with regards to NSO's capacity and interest or awareness to use MPD, and this is probably one of the areas that could be focused on. But normally the NSO is one of the agencies that is very excited to use the mobile phone big data because it can help complement provide additional information to traditional statistics.
Thank you. Sveta, please.
Sure. Maybe just to come in to say that while what Esperanza says is the ideal, I think I also definitely have encountered quite a bit of hesitation among different government agencies, including within NSOs and others. And I think part of it is a bit of uncertainty as to the value that the data brings. I think there's a recognition that, especially at the beginning, there is a cost in terms of investment in time, investment in building the relationships with the MNO, investment in building capacity within your organization. So that is potentially a cost. And then there's a question of, is that cost worth it in terms of the data that you will be getting? Especially, we get quite a lot of questions around the representativeness of the data. Can we use it for policy making, given we know it's not necessarily representative of the population? And so that's where I think quite a bit where the program can also help in terms of bringing a lot more knowledge and experience on how the data can be used in a way that does allow for policy making, ways in which we can overcome some of these challenges related to representativeness or related to bias that maybe officials who are more used to using survey data that is really collected specifically for their purpose may be hesitant to try to work with this new data that was not collected for the purpose of necessarily generating these statistics. And so I think building more knowledge and capacity around that within the NSO is going to help in terms of convincing those leaders and also demonstrating the value as well. So that's where some of the examples I try to show, hopefully to get excitement around, what you can do when you are able to get this type of data. What you can do in real time that survey data just will not allow you to do, especially when it comes to things that that are very hard to measure, like mobility. And so, that might still take time, hopefully less than a year in terms of convincing, but I think that is definitely a big part of the program is to help in terms of getting all of the stakeholders, including the NSOs, on board, recognizing the value that this data can bring, and having them all ready to invest the time in making that happen.
Okay, thank you. Trevor, please.
Yeah, so this is a really great question. One thing I would add is just using training to help build that coalition. I think the way the question was asked, the person was this dialogue with the manager, and what I'd hope that we can have are situations where we get multiple stakeholders going through workshops, going through training at the same time. And so perhaps there'll be more than one person that kind of sees the value, and if decision makers or if their management sees that they understand the value and they're building the capabilities to use this, it makes it easier, I think, to get those decisions made. And I would say once they can use it for one application like transport, then it's kind of a marginal cost to use the similar process to use the data for other applications like tourism. So there's really economies of scope, and it potentially gets easier. But leading with training to build the coalition is really a big part of this program.
I see your hands on. Please, Andres, would you like to talk? No? Okay. I see that Trevor has answered the question on the chat. It's okay. But from the others, the deadline for the teams to submit proposals is on the website, and the address is on the chat. Please go to there to see. And also, Esperança put an address here on the site, who I have on the site, if you want more information about guidance on methods and collaboration opportunities, please follow the link. And I would have more 5 minutes. So if someone had one more thing to do to speak, please, to close this session. Please, the final remarks. Esperança?
Yeah, I think just again to reiterate the presentations of both Sveta and Trevor, there's a lot of materials available, but the support is very important for countries who are going to start a journey on using mobile phone big data. So there's a deadline, and this window is open, and I think the most important is for countries to make the application or the proposal, because we won't be able to help if there's no proposal coming from the country. So it's important to already investigate the use case in the country and to talk to other stakeholders that may be interested in this new project.
Thank you. Your final remarks, Sveta?
Sure. Maybe just to emphasize, since the key thing to get out of this presentation, hopefully, is that you should apply. And I guess the second is how to do that. So if you are interested, if what you've seen today got you excited and you want to be part of the program, again, the applications are done through the World Bank internal system, and therefore to be able to apply, either if you're already working with a World Bank team, contact them today, send them the link to the website in case they haven't heard about the program yet, and that way you can start working with them to develop a proposal. Or if you're not working with a World Bank team, contact us, and maybe we can put the email in the chat so that you have the email, and then we can help to work with our operational colleagues to identify either teams in poverty or in digital development, who can then we can connect you with them, and then again you can work together to develop a proposal that is jointly submitted. So those are kind of the two channels through which you can make sure that the project is submitted through the system, and we look forward to hopefully receiving many proposals and being able to work with you either in this first cohort or in future cohorts.
Thank you. Trevor?
Just, I think what I really want to say is I hope to see people on this call that are part of that first cohort or a future cohort. Hope to see some of you in October in DC at our intake workshop. To make that happen, do reach out to your World Bank task teams or reach out to the Global Data Facility, gdfmpd@worldbank.org. And we can help make those connections. Thank you, Maria. Thank you to Andrea for hosting us. This has been an incredible platform, hopefully the first of many check-ins on the country's journey in putting mobile phone data to work for policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the speakers and the audience. We have more than 100 participants in this webinar. I expect that many of them can answer the call for the World Bank and start work with MPD. Okay, thank you. I expect to see you in other opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.